Hi, good day. So this is going to be the last of the lessons for Unit 2. So this is going to be our last video lesson. So for today, our topic is artists and artisans. So let's start. Okay. Okay, so what makes an artist different from an artisan? So basically, this question is posed for us to understand what is the difference between an artist and an artisan. So now let's have the definition for an artist. So an artist is an art practitioner, but most of the time, artists are directly inclined to doing fine arts. So, ito ay yung mga kadalasan, mga ginagawa nila ay indirectly functional art. So, yun nga, mga nagpe-paint, mga nag-sculpt, choreographer, dancer, musician, etc. So, again, indirectly functional arts with aesthetic values using imagination. So, when we say artists, we are pertaining to those people who do indirectly functional arts. Now, what about an artisan? So, an artisan, on the other hand, produces directly functional or decorative arts. Meaning, kung kanina, fine arts, ito naman, utilitarian arts yung kanilang madalas na ginagawa. So, artisans, sila yung nagpo-produce ng mga bagay na pinapakinabangan natin. So, again, wag tayong malilito. Dito kasi nalilito yung mga students ko from last time. Again, when we say artists, they are producing indirectly functional art or fine arts. Whereas artisans, they produce directly functional or decorative arts. Meaning, sila naman yung nagpo-produce ng mga bagay na pinapakinabangan natin. So, that is the difference between artists and artisans. Now, what about these people behind the art world? So, we have curators. Sorry, medyo hindi makita. Pero sa module nyo, kita po yan. So, you have curators and we have art dealers and art collectors or buyers. So, ano naman yung function nila sa art world? So, curators, these are the ones who are actually in charge of galleries, museums, and exhibits. So, they are in charge of the research behind the artworks. Sila yung parang kumbaga kapag ka may tanong about the artwork, sila yung nagpo-provide ng explanation kasi sila yung in charge with the research kung ano yung material na ginamit, anong year siya na-produce, anong year siya nadala dito sa museum na yun. So, yung curator, kumbaga, yung parang overseer ng buong museum, gallery, or ng exhibit. Now, when we have art dealers or when we say art dealers, sila naman yung syempre, yung mga nag-aahente ng artwork. So, you have art dealers or art sellers. Pero when we say art sellers, sila talaga yung ginagawa nila, bumibili sila ng artwork from artists or artisans, bumibili sila ng artwork doon, tapos ibebenta nila yun sa sarili nilang shop. Okay? So, examples nun ay yung mga furniture shops. So, yung mga furniture shops, bibili sila ng furniture sa mga gumagawa ng furniture, sa mga artisans. Tapos, kapag sila naman, nilagay nila sa sarili nilang shops, syempre, may sarili na silang patong doon kasi sa kanila naman gagaling yun. Kumbaga, binibili lang nila yung artwork doon sa mga artists or artisans. Tapos, binibenta na nila yun on their own. So, those are art sellers. But when we say art dealers, sila yung parang nag-aahente naman ng mga artwork. So, halimbawa, si artisan or si artists, sila yung gumagawa ng artwork. Tapos si art dealer naman ngayon, hahanapan niya ng customer si artist or artisan. So, yun yung ginagawa ni art dealers. Again, dealing with art. Hindi sila nagbebenta directly. So, hinahanapan lang nila ng deal yung artist para makahanap sila ng customer. Okay? So, you have there art dealers and art sellers. Now, what about art collectors and art buyers? So, parehas lang naman silang bumibili ng art. Si art collector at si art buyer. Pero si art buyer kasi, parang ang ginagawa niya, basta may makita siyang artwork, gusto niyang bilhin, so bibili niya ngayon, art buyer na siya. But when you see art collectors has this certain theme or certain category of art that they are really targeting. Tapos, idadagdag nila sa kanilang collection. So, kumbaga, yung collection nila, hindi yun random collection. They are collecting something of the same theme. Tapos, yun yung parang tina-target talaga nila in order for them to add it to their collection. Say, for example, antique collection. So, hindi naman sila pwedeng bumili ng contemporary na furniture or contemporary na vase or pottery, tapos idadagdag nila sa antique collection nila. Hindi pwedeng ganon. So, kapag sinabing antique collection, lahat ng binibili nila ay antique din. Okay? So, yun yung pagkakaiba ni art collector tsaka ni art buyer. Kasi si art collector, may specific siyang target or may specific siyang category na sinusunod or theme na sinusunod para sa kanyang binibili, para sa kanyang collection. Whereas, art buyer naman, as long as he or she appreciates this artwork and he or she wants to buy it, yun, pwede niya yung bilhin. So, yun yung pagkakaiba naman ni art collector and ni art buyer. Now, for every artist and artisan, syempre, we have different mediums and techniques na ginagamit nila. Okay, so medium is the mode of expression in which the concept, idea, or message is being conveyed. So these are the materials which are used by an artist to interpret his feelings or thoughts. So what is the difference between medium and material? Excuse me. So, when we say material, these are the raw items. Whereas, when we say medium, ito talaga ay naka-formulate or naka-program para gamitin sa art. Okay? So, pag sinabi nating material, halimbawa, wood and lead. Those are materials. But if we're going to combine wood and lead, we are going to create a pencil. And pencil is a medium for art. Okay? So, ganun yung ano nila. Pag sinabing medium, yun ay ginagamit natin sa art. Pag sinabi nating materials, ito yung mga raw materials or raw items talaga. Pero in some cases, like in sculpture and in architecture, yung materials mismo, ito na rin yung para nagiging medium. Kasi you don't need to like formulate wood. So wood na talaga mismo yung ginagamit para gumawa ng bahay or wood na talaga mismo yung ginagamit para gumawa ng sculpture. So hindi na siya kailangan gamitan ng parang i-modify pa para maging medium. Next, many mediums are used in creating different works of art. Syempre. Now, what about technique? So, yun yung sinasabi natin kanina, medium. Yun yung ginagamit natin para gumawa ng artwork. What about technique? So, technique is defined as the manner in which the artist controls his medium to achieve the desired effect. So, again, this is parang the manipulation or the manner on how an artist controls his medium. So it has something to do with the way he manipulates his mediums to express his idea. So ito yung specific niya na style or yung parang manner niya on how he manipulates the medium in order to achieve his desired effect. Okay? So halimbawa ng technique ay ito. So we have hatching, cross-hatching, blending, rendering, squiggle or squibbles, and we have contour hatching. These are examples of techniques in visual art, specifically in drawing, using pencil or graphite or charcoal. Okay, so you have hatching. Ito yung mga, sabi nga natin, manipulation of medium. So, ang medium na ginamit dito ay pencil, okay, or lead or graphite. Okay, so pencil, may iba't iba kang technique kung paano mo gagamitin yung pencil to achieve your desired effect. So, in this case, the desired effect is shadowing. So, value, showing value, light and darkness. So, makikita natin, there are different techniques on how to achieve light and darkness here. So, you could use hatching. So, hatching is single strokes. So, cross-hatching is, of course, nagko-cross yung mga strokes natin. Blending, hindi makita dito, sorry. Pero blending is when you smudge the mark. So, halimbawa, naka-cross-hatching na siya, tapos isa-smudge mo siya using like cotton or like cloth. So, kung ano man yung gagamitin natin. Next, rendering. So, how do you achieve rendering? So, we achieve rendering when we are gonna draw it parang blackout. So, dito kasi sa mga iba, etong mga to, sila ay white muna, white circle, and then tsaka siya lalagyan ng shadow. So, for rendering, sometimes you are doing na drawing mata ng bilog, tapos iitiman natin yung buong bilog, and then we are going to create the highlights using eraser. So, unti-unti naman natin siyang buburahin. Gagawa tayo ng effect using the eraser. So, when you use eraser to create that kind of effect, that's what you call rendering. Okay? So, in drawing, yan yung tinatawag natin na rendering. Next is we have squiggly or squiggles or squibbles. Ito naman yung pa-bilog-bilog na ganyan. So, yun yung tinatawag natin na squiggles. And we have contour hatching. So, In contrary with the ordinary or the standard hatching na single strokes lang siya. So yung contour hatching naman, ito yung medyo nagko-curve yung lines natin. Okay, so when we are doing contour hatching. Okay, so these again are kinds of techniques. So to emphasize, techniques are again the way on how we manipulate our medium to achieve our desired effect. Okay, next, let's have visual arts. So we are going to tackle different mediums used in visual arts. So as we all know, visual arts are the kinds of artworks which occupy space and are usually done on a flat surface, and yeah, most of the time they are two-dimensional, but sometimes we have sculptures like these which are three-dimensional, but they still appeal to the sense of sight. Okay, so let's start with painting. So, what are the mediums being used in painting? Okay, so again, to have a definition for painting, so this is the art of creating meaningful um, designs on a flat surface by the use of brush, paint, or other pigments. Sometimes you don't use brush, but technically we are always using paints or pigments for it. Okay, so let's start with what are the materials or what are the mediums used in painting. So, ayan. The first one is we have watercolor. So watercolor is somewhat difficult to handle for other people. Actually, me, for myself, personally, I am not really good in using watercolor. Why? Because it's really hard to manipulate because you have to control the water, and it's difficult to produce warm and rich tones because watercolor is somewhat subtle when it comes to colors unless you are going to let it dry out, and then pagkatuyo na siya, lalagyan niyo siya ng layer ulit. So now with much richer and darker tones, okay? So sometimes watercolor is parang diluted, yun nga because of the water, it is not really designed to become brightly colored, okay? So most of the time medyo pastel yung kanyang kulay, medyo diluted, medyo matamlay ng konti, but still you can produce artworks such as these which are, maganda naman siya tignan. Pero yun nga, compared to like acrylic or poster paint, medyo mas malumana yung kulay niya. So example, ito, by Gregors Robel. So most of the time, watercolor is used in architecture and interior design. So yung mga natural na, yung mga artworks before rendering like in architecture, yun nga, and interior design. Ngayon kasi meron na parang mga AutoCAD or may mga 3D na designs na tayo na ginagawa sa computer. Pwede na doon na tayo rekta na tayong gumawa nun. But for the traditional art designs in architecture and in interior design, ito yung ginagawa nila. Talagang nagdo-drawing sila sa canvas or sa papel, and then kinukulayan nila ng watercolor. So usually ganito yung itsura ng watercolor. And katulad dun sa sinabi ko, as I've said, 'di ba nga, yung watercolor kahit na gusto natin siyang gawing matingkad, pero anong nangyayari kasi nagiging diluted talaga yung kulay niya. So it produces a much more calm color compared to other paints. Okay, next let's have gouache. Okay, so gouache is an opaque watercolor paint, so which has major effects na parang katulad siya ng poster paint. So the closest thing to gouache is poster paint. So hindi siya, although medyo mas angat siya ng konti kaysa kay watercolor, hindi in terms na na mas maganda siya. Ang sinasabi ko is mas matingkad siya and mas solid siya. Kasi si watercolor is somewhat transparent. But si opaque, si gouache kasi it's opaque. Ibig sabihin, hindi masyadong tumatagos yung light sa kanya. Mas may weight siya compared kay watercolor. So you have gouache as an opaque watercolor. So if you could observe poster paints, parang ganun din si gouache. 'Di ba si poster paint, pag nilagyan natin ng poster paint, medyo hindi na natin nakikita yung lines ng papel. Unlike kay watercolor, si watercolor, kapag may bakat ka ng pencil or meron kang bakat ng ballpen, tapos nilagyan mo ng watercolor, kitang-kita pa rin talaga yung bakat ng pencil or yung bakat ng sign pen. Pero kapag si gouache na yung nilagay mo doon, medyo natatabunan niya na ng konti kasi nga opaque siya. And of course, the colors are warmer and richer than watercolor. So say for example, we have this painting by Robert W. Begg. So as you can see, the colors here are much more solid and much more stronger than the colors that watercolors produce, okay? Next is we have fresco. So fresco paint is always used, or not really always used, but most of the time used in ceiling paintings or in paintings sa mga churches. So this is a portion of the Sistine Chapel dun sa ceiling painting ng Sistine Chapel ni Michelangelo. So here you can see this paint is an example of fresco. Now, before we apply fresco, we must make sure that we are going to apply it into a wet white plaster, okay? So, kailangan muna may preliminary muna na plaster siya na basa, tapos tsaka mo siya lalagyan ng fresco, okay? Next is we have tempera. For tempera, these are the pigments which are mixed with egg yolks or egg whites. So, in contrary with other paints, yung ibang paints kasi ang hinahalo nila ay like thinner or like water. But here, ang hinahalo natin ay egg yolk or egg white. So, we call this as tempera. So, most of the time, the pigments of tempera produces warmer colors and richer tones. So, more on like yellowish, medyo reddish yung kulay na produce niya. And most of the time, this is used in Indian paintings. Like this example. So, this painting is by Suparna Day. Okay, makikita natin, ayan o, since egg yolks ang hinahalo, medyo madilaw yung kulay talaga ng tempera. Okay, the next one is we have pastels. So, we are very familiar with this one, oil pastels. Ito ay talagang ubiquitous. Nakikita natin siya sa maraming bahagi ng bansa natin. Sa Pandayan, meron. Sa National Bookstore, meron. Sa Expressions, meron din. So, ito din, madalas natin ginagamit sa mga poster making and slogan kapag ka high school tayo. So, ito po ay, ayun nga, dried paste pigment. Tapos may halo din siyang chalk and compounded with gum water. Kaya kung makikita natin, kadalasan medyo sticky siya. And of course, we also have oil pastels. Yun naman, inahaluan naman siya ng oil. Okay? Kaya makikita natin, pagka nagkaroon tayo ng oil pastel sa kamay, medyo malagkit siya, tapos medyo madikit siya because of the compounds inside the pastel. Okay? So, medyo madali din siyang ismudge. Pagka mapapansin natin, mas madali siyang ikalat kaysa sa ibang mga pigments like crayons, ganyan. Kasi yung crayons ay medyo waxy. Oil pastels naman or pastels, they are very easy to smudge because meron nga silang oil or meron silang gum water. Okay, so ayan, ito ay isa example ng artwork ko. Gawa ko to nung 2012. 14 years old ata ako. Hindi ako sure. Pero ayun nga, ayan. Isa example natin ng artwork using oil pastels. So, oil pastels po yung gamit ko dyan. Ito din, artwork ko din siya. So, oil pastel din yung ginamit ko dito. So, ang ginamit ko dito ay pentel ata na oil pastel tsaka crepas. I'm not really sure. But oil pastels yung ginamit ko. So, even sabi kasi ng iba, medyo mahirap gamitin yung oil pastel as medium. Actually, medyo mahirap talaga kasi it's messy, especially this part. Nung ginagawa ko yung part na to, yung langit, hirap na hirap ako kasi nga baka mas-smudge magkaroon ng smudge dito sa bandang taas. Pero the technique there is every time na magkukulay kayo, make sure na pupunasan nyo ng either tissue or cotton yung oil pastel ninyo para pag ginanon nyo siya ulit, walang ibang residue ng ibang kulay. Kasi nga, maghahalo-halo na siya. So, mahirap na siyang burahin pag ganon. Ayan. So, next, let's have okay, encaustic. So, for encaustic naman, this is used by ancient Egyptians. Although, ginagamit pa rin naman siya ng ibang artists sa ngayon, pero ito ay kadalasan na nakikita dun sa mga mummy cases ng mga Egyptians. So, paano natin na-achieve yung effect ng encaustic? So, we are painting with wax colors. So, fixed with heat. Okay, so if you're familiar with yung parang sa undas, yung ginagawa ng mga bata, yung nagdo-drawing sila gamit yung tulo ng kandila, parang gano'n yung encaustic kasi medyo waxy din siya, okay? So, like this, ito yung mga examples niya. So, you are going to mix these pigments with wax and then you are going to use heat para lumambot siya tapos tsaka nyo siya ipe-paint. And most of the time, nagiging embossed yung kulay nito. Ay, nagiging embossed nagiging embossed siya kapag natuyo na siya. Halimbawa, ito. So, ito ay isang example ng encaustic. So, ito ay isang manok. So, makikita natin, medyo naka-emboss siya ng konti. Tapos, may mga butas-butas siya. Kasi ito yung, dahil sa heat, di ba nga, dahil wax siya. So, kapag ka mainit, tapos mabilis mo siyang binuhos, anong nangyayari? Nagbubula-bula siya. Ngayon, kapag nag-deteriorate na yung bula, nagiging holes siya like this. Okay? Kasi nga dahil sila ay wax. So, this is an example of encaustic. And if you will observe the mummy cases, di ba makikita nyo yung sa mummy cases, yung mga mukha ng pharaoh dun sa kanilang tomb. So, makikita nyo doon na medyo naka-emboss ng konti yung mga makeup nila and yung designs ng tomb. It's because it's encaustic. Okay? Next is we have oil painting. So, if you're familiar with oil painting, this is actually one of the most expensive art activities because of the medium or the materials used. Kasi nga, they are not just using any kind of oil. So, they are using linseed oil for oil painting. And of course, it's kind of messy. Medyo mahirap i-achieve yung oil painting, lalo na pag bago pa lang kayo dun sa oil painting. Kasi nga, just like oil pastel, yon medyo mahirap i-manipulate din yung colors. But it produces very good colors. So if watercolor is somewhat subtle, yun nga, sabi nga natin, medyo um, diluted yung color ng watercolors kasi medyo on the pastel side siya. Pero itong oil painting, ito ay stronger and richer yung kanyang kulay. So, katulad nito. So, makikita natin, kadalasan, yung oil paintings ay ginagamit natin sa mga impressionistic na um, art styles, okay? So, katulad nito, makikita natin na very strong yung colors. Unlike ng sa watercolor, which is yun nga, medyo pastel. For this one, makikita natin na mas bold yung mga kulay na meron siya. And last one is acrylic. So this is the thickest, okay? So this is the thickest among these examples. So for this medium, so pwede natin siyang i-mix using thinner or water kasi nga yung acrylic, the tendency of acrylic actually, since this is the thickest among these examples, ito din yung brightest, ito rin yung boldest and strongest and most opaque, okay? So for those people na familiar sa acrylic, kung nakapag ano na kayo, pintura na kayo ng bahay or kapag nagpe-painting talaga kayo at gumagamit kayo ng acrylic, so makikita nyo doon, yung paint ng acrylic ay sobrang hirap niyang ihalo. Tapos nagkakaroon siya ng residue sa ilalim. Okay? So mahirap siyang haluin, tapos nakakangawit siya, lalo na kapag matigas siya. Kasi nga, yung acrylic paint, pag na-expose siya sa air, yun nga, tumitigas siya. That's why, kailangan natin na magkaroon ng thinner on hand. Kasi nga, kapag ka medyo tumigas na yung acrylic paint natin, we mix the thinner, yun nga, to make it thin. Kasi nga, kaya nga siya thinner eh. Kasi yung acrylic ay sobrang kapal niya. So, para lumabnaw siya ng konti, hinahaluan natin siya ngayon ng thinner. Now, etong acrylic paint, medyo mahirap siyang uh, gamitin din, first and foremost, because dahil nga opaque siya, kapag nagkamali tayo ng paint na ginamit, we have to paint it all over again. Or kung gusto nyo, pwede nyo lagyan ng white or ng plaster. Pero if you are putting it on like a mural, tapos nagkamali kayo ng kulay na ginamit, yun nga, you have to let it dry first bago nyo siya patungan ulit ng isa pang beses. And of course, acrylic paint is very challenging to use also if you are mixing colors together. Kasi nga, sometimes kapag ka na-expose siya sa air, nagkakaroon siya ng ibang effect. So, sometimes mas magiging darker siya kaysa dun sa ine-expect natin. So, it's a very tricky medium to use. But nevertheless, if you are intending to use it to create like an effect of na matingkad yung kulay, strong yung kulay, very festive yung kulay, I would recommend that you would use acrylic paint. So, example, ayan, painting ko rin to. So, sa canvas naman to, sa parang cloth-like material. So, ayan, acrylic paint. Pero yung sa mga ganyang mga, yung nabibili lang sa Pandayan, yung mga ganyang acrylic paint lang yung ginamit ko. Ayan. So, makikita natin, compared to other paints na diniscuss natin kanina, yung kulay niya ay mas vibrant talaga. Dahil nga mas opaque siya, mas stronger yung kanyang kulay. So, that is for painting. Now, what about drawing? What are the mediums that we use in drawing? So, the most common is we have pencil. Syempre, most common siya. Ever since we are children, we use pencil already for like drawing and for writing. So, we have pencil leads which are graded depending on shade, hardness, or softness. Okay? So, yung pinaka nasa gitna is yung HB. Okay? So, yung B grade na mga pencil, ito ay yung mas malalambot. Yung H grade naman, ito ay sa mga matitigas na. So, pag sinabi nating 4H, ibig sabihin, very brittle. Pag tinasahan natin siya, yun yung tipo na parang makakasaksak ka ng kaklase mo kapag ka H grade. Kasi nga, ito yung matigas na lead, tapos ito yung brittle na na lead na kapag ka tinasahan natin siya, sobrang talim niya. Whereas kapag ka yung B grade naman na pencil, ito yung medyo softer na lead. So, kung familiar kayo, kung nagdo-drawing kayo before, or kung nakagamit man kayo ng iba't ibang grades ng pencil, you would see there na halimbawa, HB or 5B, yung mga B grade, malalambot yung kanilang lead. So, pwede mong isulat sa balat mo kasi nga, ano siya malambot siya. Pero kapag yung H, yung sinulat mo sa balat mo, masusugat ka, magkakagasgas ka nun kasi nga, matigas siya. Okay? So, again, you have here pencils, which are graded according to shade, kung gaano ka dark yung shade niya, hardness mismo ng lead, and softness ng lead. So, these are the standard pencil grades. So, pwede rin naman to, pumunta kayo ng National Bookstore or ng Pandayan, meron silang lagay ng pencil dito sa gilid. You could observe yung lead nila. You compare H grade and B grade. So, doon yung makikita yung hardness and softness ng lead. Okay? So, ito din yung yung pagka may mga tayo, may mga pencils tayo, ito. So, number 1, ito yung mga shades natin. HB, sabi ko nga, dahil nasa gitna siya. So, ito yung ginagamit natin kadalasan sa exam. Ayan. Tapos, mapapansin nyo, yung number 4 na Mongol, di ba, parang napaka-light na ng kulay niya. Tapos, pag tinasahan natin siya, sobrang, tigas na ng lead niya. Kasi nga, nasa H grade na siya. Okay? So, and then we have number 1, medyo dark pa yung Mongol 1 compared to number 2. Okay? Kasi nga, yung mga B grade, mas dark sila, pero mas malambot yung lead. Yung H grade naman, sila naman yung light, pero matitigas yung kanilang lead. Okay, so ito isang example din, artwork ko din to. So, ito ay sa illustration board, 1/8 illustration board. Tapos, ang ginamit ko dito ay 5B na colleen, 8B na colleen, tsaka Mongol 2. Ang ginamit ko dito sa artwork na to. Okay. So, next we have pen and ink. So, this is one of the oldest mediums. So, ever since parang the Chinese calligraphy na nauso siya, so pen and ink na yung gamit nila. So, ayan, isang example to. Ngayon, Inktober tayo ngayon. So, we have the use of ink. Okay? So, itong ink, ginagamit natin siya usually or traditionally, ginagamit siya sa calligraphy, sa paggawa ng comics, sa cartoons, yung mga traditional manga artist, talagang mano-mano yun na ini-inkan nila isa-isa. Pero ngayon, dahil nga advanced na yung technology natin, so hindi na kailangan yung mano-mano tayo na nag-ink. So, diretso na yun na ginagamit nila ay yung mga drawing tablets na. Pero yun nga, as far as we are concerned, traditionally, we are using pen and ink. So, this is a kind of medium wherein gagamit kayo ng either brush or ng parang yung nib pen, and then ang gagawin, isasawsaw siya dun sa ink, which is a pigmented liquid. Ayan. So, India ink, yung very common. So, ito, isang example natin ng painting using ink. Okay, next we have bistre or bistra. So this one is para siyang charcoal except dahil suit of wood siya, it would not produce black pigment katulad ng charcoal. Brown ang pigment na kanyang napoproduce. So ito yung isang example. Kadalasan sa mga coffee shops, yung mga naka-frame na maliliit, bistre yung gamit nila doon. So ayan nga, makikita natin na compared to charcoal, which has black pigment, bistre has brown pigment. Next, we have crayons. Ito nga yung sabi ko kanina, yung crayons ay medyo waxy in nature. So, dito nyo ma-determine if yung crayon ninyo ay good quality or bad quality. Kasi kapag good quality yung crayon, more on pigment, less on wax. Pero kapag bad quality yung crayons na nagamit nyo, halimbawa yung nabibili nyo lang sa bangketa or sa tabi-tabi, parang hindi na sumusulat. So, more than a crayon, parang kandila na yung ginagamit ninyo. Kasi pag kinaskas nyo siya sa papel, walang pigment na lumalabas. Puro wax yung lumalabas. Okay, so bakit ganon? Kasi nga, yung compound ng crayon ay wax and pigment. Okay, so how to determine if your crayon is good? Of course, kapag nilagay nyo siya sa paper, very pigmented siya. Now, if it's bad quality, it's more on wax than pigment. Okay, especially, I would recommend if you're going to test crayons, if you're going to test out crayons, you start with color pink, okay? Kasi yung pink talaga, sa pink talaga magkakatalo yon. Kasi kadalasan, kapag bad quality yung crayon, pag kinaskas mo yung color pink, more on wax siya rather than pigment, okay? So, ito, example natin ng crayons. So, if you're going to color on a piece of paper, pwede natin siya ma-achieve using crayons. Kadalasan kasi feeling natin yung crayons ay hindi magandang medium. So, ang maganda lang doon is yung technique natin, kung ano yung gagamitin natin to achieve this kind of coloring. So, yun nga, medyo diinan natin ng konti yung pagkukulay and make sure that you are working on a flat surface na merong patungan. Okay? Kasi kapag, halimbawa, bond paper, tapos diretso tayo sa lamesa, babakat yung mismong lamesa dun sa drawing natin. So, make sure na meron kayong parang nasa likod niya or nasa ilalim niya, like parang book or several pieces of paper para mas maganda yung texture niya. Next, we have charcoal. So, for charcoal, ayan, carbonaceous material, again, which is a product of heating wood or organic substances in the absence of oxygen. So, in short, gagawa kayo ng uling. Okay? So, yung uling, yung gagamitin ninyo na medium. So, ayan, yung magiging kalalabasan niya. So, maganda siya, very pigmented siya. Yun nga, parehas sila na wood and parehas sila na parang suit, pero ang kaibahan nga niya sa bistre is yung sa bistre ay brown, sa kanya naman ay black. Pag sinabi natin charcoal. Next is we have silver point. So, yung silver point naman, self-explanatory na siya, silver point. So, ibig sabihin, yung dulo niya, yung ganito niya ay silver. So, it's a silver stylus that produces a grayish line. So, para ang nangyari dyan is kinakaskas nyo yung surface. And depending on sa pagkaskas ninyo, doon kukulay yung silver point. So, makikita natin yung example niya, ganyan. Okay? So, lahat ng silver point na medium, ganyan yung itsura ng kinalalabasan niya na artwork. So, lagi siyang nagpo-produce ng grayish lines or grayish drawings.